Welcome back to the daily Rambam class. We are learning today chapter 5 of the laws of Bchoros, firstborn animals. It is Thursday, so we will begin with a quick look at where we are up to in the Rambam. We are learning the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, that's the name of his work, and it includes 14 volumes. Baruch Hashem, we are already up to volume number 9. We're getting close to the end. And we are learning about sacrifices, korbanos, more specifically, private sacrifices. The Rambam has 1,000 chapters. Each of the 14 volumes has somewhere between 40 and 144 chapters. As I said, we're up to volume number 9, which deals with sacrifices. There are 6 subjects, only 45 chapters, almost the smallest book of the Rambam. And let's take a look at these 6 subjects. We have Korban Pesach, the Paschal Lamb, 10 chapters of that we learned about. We have the Chagiga, celebrating Yom Tov, 3 chapters of that we learned about. And now we are up to the third topic of the book, Bchoros, firstborn animals, a total of 8 chapters. We are up to chapter 5. Up on the horizon, we will be learning about Shkagos, when a person sins, they make a mistake, an offering that would be brought because of the mistake that they made, because of their sins. 15 chapters of that. And then Mechusrei Kapara, for atonement. In certain circumstances, a person would need to bring an offering in order to regain complete purity. And finally, Tamura, in place of when a person tries to take a second animal and transfer the holiness from one to the other. These are the 6 topics that are spoken about in the 9th book of the Rambam, Sefer HaKabonis, the book of private sacrifice offerings. The Rambam introduced this 9th book with a verse from Tehillim towards the end. By my prayer be established as incense before you. The raising of my hands is a meal offering brought in the afternoon, which the Rambam is telling us that when we daven, we are davening in the place of these particular offerings that were brought in the times of the Beis HaMikdash. Well, now for today's chapter, we are in the 3rd topic, the laws of firstborn animals. There are 8 chapters. Over the beginning of the week, Sunday through Tuesday, we learned about if the animal is perfect or it's been blemished. Yesterday and today, we learned about animals that are exempt and doubts. And over the next few days, tomorrow, Shabbos and Sunday, we'll be learning about tithing animals, which the Rambam also puts together with firstborn animals because their laws are similar. Now for today's chapter, chapter 5. Here it is in point form on the left-hand side. Let's open up the text. It's a rather small chapter, only 11 halachas. Here we are. The following laws apply when a sheep that had not given birth before gives birth to 2 males. The sheep had twins, Mazel Tov. Even if both of their heads emerged at the same time, don't know how possible that is, but even if it did happen, it's still impossible that one did not emerge before the other. You could never have more than one firstborn. When a person has twins, they're not both firstborns. Only one is a firstborn. And if you're not sure which one was first, then you don't know which one you should give to the kohen, none of your children. But if you've got a sheep that gave birth to 2 babies, and one is a firstborn and one is secondborn, the kohen only gets the firstborn. So which one should you give to the Kohen? You don't know which one was the firstborn. So the Kohen should take the weaker one. And the second one is firstborn of doubtful status. So let's talk about this for a moment because this is a key theme of the chapter. We have a concept in Jewish law, Hamoitzi mechaveiroi olav haraya. If a person wants to take something from his friend, then the burden of proof is on him. Now, right now, I've got 2 baby sheep. They're both mine. Now, the Kohen wants to take one of those 2 sheep, or he has a right to one of those 2 sheep. So he could take one of the 2. He could either take the 100 rand sheep, or he could take the 50 rand sheep. So if he comes and he says the 100 rand sheep is mine, I could say to him, 1 second. It's possible that the 50 rand sheep is yours, right? So 50 rand sheep, 50 rand's worth of sheep is definitely yours. But the second 50 rand, who says it's yours? Right now, they're both in my possession, and you want to take one of them from me. So you'll need to prove that the more expensive sheep, the stronger sheep, is entitled to you before you take it. You can't prove it because we don't know which one was born first. So you'll have to settle for the weaker one. Since we're not sure which of the 2 sheep was born first, the Kohen is given the weaker of the 2 because he has no right to bother that. And the other sheep that stays at home, it could be that was the firstborn. So we'll have to see how we handle it. So both sheep are possibly firstborn, and therefore the weaker of the 2 is given to the Kohen, and the other needs to be handled in the way that we will discuss in Halacha 3, Gimel. If one of them died, one of the 2 first and second born died, then what does the Kohen get? Nothing. Why? Because again, I as owner could say to the Kohen, right now there's only 1 sheep. Either it is the firstborn or it's the secondborn. You can't take it away from me because maybe it's the secondborn. Prove to me that it's the firstborn and not the secondborn. The Kohen can't prove that. So he doesn't get anything. As we just said, when one desires to expropriate property from a friend, the burden of proof is on him. Similarly, if a mother gave birth to a male and female, now the Kohen only gets firstborn males. We're not sure which one was born first. Was the male born first or second? The male is of doubtful status. Maybe the female emerged first. Therefore, the Kohen gets nothing. Because when one desires to expropriate property from a colleague, the burden of proof is on the person that wants to take the property. And since the Kohen cannot prove that the male was born first, he gets nothing. Many more scenarios like the ones we just discussed, when there are 2 sheep that have not given birth, had not given birth previously, and they both gave birth to 2 males. So then now we know that both of these babies are both firstborn. So they're both given to the Kohen. But if the 2 sheep gave birth to a male and a female, and they became mixed up, the male is given to the Kohen. Okay, well, yeah, even if they weren't mixed up, the female would never be given to the Kohen. So that's still straightforward. 2 newborns, one's male, one's female, the male goes to the Kohen. I think the Rambam mentions this because he's building up to the next case. If the 2 sheep gave birth to 2 males and a female, one of them had twins. So now, what can the Kohen be entitled to? There's 3 animals, and 2 of the 3 are firstborn. Right? 3 babies, 2 of the 3 are firstborn. So how many does he get? Does he get the 2 males? No. 1 male is definitely his. He would take the weaker of the 2 males. And the other male may be secondborn. It could be it was the female that was the second, that was the firstborn of the other mother. If one of them died, the priest gets nothing. Because it could be that the one firstborn was the female, and the other firstborn was the one that died. which means that the firstborn that's alive is of doubtful status. And as we said, when one desires to expropriate property from a colleague, the burden of proof is on him, the one that wants to expropriate. If the two sheep gave birth to two females and a male, or two males and two females. So now, again, there are two firstborns and two secondborns, and the two males and the two females. What does the Kohen get? Nothing. But it is possible to say that the female was born first than the male, and the males are of doubtful status. Again, because when one desires to expropriate property from a colleague, the burden of proof is on him. So if one of these two sheep had given birth before and one had not, and then they each gave birth to twins, and we don't know who was born to who, first and second, but only one of the two was actually giving birth to a firstborn. Should they give birth to two males? And then, okay, so a few scenarios. So one was a firstborn mother and one was not. And then two males were born. So then they're both firstborns of doubtful status, and the Kohen will get the weaker one. If one of them died, again, the Kohen gets nothing. Because it could be that the male that's alive was from the mother that had given birth before. Similarly, if the two sheep gave birth to a male and a female, that is not known which gave birth to which, the priest does not receive anything, because it could be that the male was born to the mother that was not having a firstborn, and it could be the firstborn was female, so the male will be in doubt. So what do we do with the firstborn that's not given to the Kohen, or the doubtful firstborn that's not given to the Kohen? So this is what should happen. As long as it doesn't have a blemish, so that it still has a level of holiness, it would be brought as an offering if we knew it was a firstborn, but we don't. So what do? We let it pasture until it develops some form of blemish that disqualifies it. And once it would be disqualified, then the owners can eat it. If a Kohen managed to get his hold on it, in all the scenarios we discussed in Halacha 1 and 2, that doubtful firstborn, if the Kohen got it, then he keeps it. Why? Because possession is 9/10 of the law. Once the Kohen has it in his hands, he can now say to the owner, right now it's in my property. You want to take it away from me. Can you prove that it's yours? The owner can't, because maybe it was a firstborn. So it stays in the hands of the Kohen. So if you're a farmer, you got to make sure to keep your security gates locked tight, because if firstborn, I guess if you had video footage of the Kohen coming in and taking that particular animal, then it could be argued that it's as if it's still in your possession, because it's clear that he took it. I'm not sure. Or maybe this really is a whole discussion of what does it mean possession is 9/10 of the law. Once it's in the hands of the Kohen, if we know the Kohen took it from the Israelites, which actually we do, it doesn't change the fact that right now it's in his hands and you want to take it out of his hands and you need a proof that it's not his, prove that it's not his, and you can't, so the Kohen would keep it. Okay, you must take it only after it becomes blemished. So also the Kohen needs to wait till it has a wound that would disqualify it before he eats it, because until then it would need to be brought as an offering, and he can't bring it as an offering because maybe it's not the firstborn, so he would have to wait. Okay, kids stick to their parents. When a person had both animals that had given birth before and animals that had not given birth before, so you have in your flock some new mothers and some old mothers. Some sheep just gave birth and some had previously given birth. And now they all have babies and each of them are feeding their own children. So we can assume that whichever animal is feeding from its mother is indeed the child. And therefore we can assume that if those that had given birth previously were feeding females, and those that hadn't given birth before were feeding males, so then we could go under the assumption that the males that they're feeding are their very own children, which means they would be firstborn and would be given to the Kohen. We follow the presumption that every animal is giving suck to its own offspring. Okay, the halachas 5 and 6. Now what happens if you deposited your firstborn for care? You right, nowadays they have what's called dog hotels when you want to go on holiday. So you had your sheep hotel. You wanted to go to Mauritius, and you had your firstborn, and you asked, you deposited by the local sheep hotel, and then you come back, and the owner says, actually, I'm not sure whose is whose. No, you don't know. Is this a firstborn? Is it not a firstborn? So you had two individuals entrusting male animals, one a firstborn and one not, with a shepherd, and one of them died. So the shepherd may leave the second, and we don't know which one died. We don't know whose animals died. So the shepherd would say, guys, this is what I have. The other one died. I could prove to you that I wasn't responsible for it. It died due to just natural causes. Here's the second animal, and you'll need to figure out between yourselves who it belongs to. This animal is considered a firstborn of doubtful status and should be divided between the two owners because neither can identify his animal. Obviously, if they can identify it, then that's good. And a person trusts the firstborn animal to another person who places it together with his own ordinary animal, and then one of them died. They don't know which one. Again, we follow the principle when one desires to expropriate property from a colleague, the burden of proof is on him. The animal is considered a firstborn of doubtful status. Even if a kohen who is a shepherd leaves his firstborn animal in a person's courtyard together with that person's ordinary animal, if one of them die, we follow the principle when one desires to expropriate property from a colleague, the burden of proof is on him. We may not expropriate property from a person's courtyard unless there is substantial proof. For it is with the consent of the owner of the firstborn that it was placed together with his ordinary animal. So now the person that was entrusting the animal would need to have proof. He'd need to have some sign that the animal that's still alive is his in order to be able to take it back. A general principle is that an Israelite is not suspected to actually damage the animal, to cause a blemish to the animal so that he can eat it. And therefore his word is accepted. If he says this is a firstborn of doubtful status, we inspect the blemish and we would allow him to eat it if it is a blemish that disqualifies the animal. Now, firstborns of special animals or of special funds. Whenever a consecrated animal, so a person had an animal and he said, I am making this as an offering in the base of Mikdash. And then it received a permanent blemish. Sorry. First, it had a permanent blemish, and he didn't realize you're not allowed to consecrate a blemished animal. Either he didn't see the blemish or he didn't know the law, and he consecrated it. So then it's not inherently holy because the holiness wasn't able to fall upon it because it was blemished. And so therefore, its child would be considered a firstborn. As we'll learn soon, a consecrated animal's child does not have the halacha of a firstborn. It does not have to be given to the kohen. But this animal would be given to the kohen because although he consecrated it, it already had a permanent blemish. The consecration was of no consequence as far as the firstborn offspring. But if they received a temporary blemish before they were consecrated, or they were first consecrated and then received a permanent blemish and then redeemed, so then the holiness, the consecration took effect, which means this is now a holy animal, and which means that its offsprings are exempt from the laws of the firstborn. It did not become ordinary animals in all respects, as indicated by the fact, so although they had a blemish, since originally they did not have a blemish, or since it was a temporary blemish, the holiness does fall upon it, and therefore it is exempted from the laws of a firstborn. And the proof is that one would violate the illa, which is misappropriating, misusing holy animals when dealing with this animal, which means that it is holy, and therefore its children are not halachically considered firstborns as far as having to be given to the kohen. More on that, when a person purchases an animal with money from the second tithes in Yerushalayim. So a farmer would have to, when harvesting his produce, give the first 10% to a kohen, and the second 10% he would bring with him to eat in Jerusalem by the pilgrimages. Or, if he lived far, he would redeem it on money and take that money with him to eat in Jerusalem. So, if a person took that money that was designated, that was Ma'aser Sheni was the second time which needed to be spent on food while visiting Jerusalem. Now, once a person comes to Jerusalem, he can spend the money on any food, and it's regular food. You can go to kosher McDonald's and enjoy a nice kosher burger, and that's fine, because that second tithe is just designated to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Once he enters Yerushalayim, he can use it for any food that he wants. And therefore, if he purchased an animal and it had a firstborn child, at that point, once it's in Jerusalem, it's considered like regular funds, because now it's reached its destination, and therefore it wouldn't be considered holy to be exempted from firstborn. Rather, it would be required in the laws of a firstborn, given to the Kohen, its offspring. If, however, a person purchases an animal with the produce of the sabbatical year, he took Shemitah produce, we're now in the year of Shemitah, Shemitah produce is not supposed to be used, then he did use it, then that's holy, Shemitah produce, and are exempt from the requirements of the firstborn. The rationale is that one is not allowed to perform commercial activity with the produce of the sabbatical year. You're not allowed to sell Shemitah produce. It's just it's for everybody to enjoy and eat. As the Torah says, it's just to partake of. Meaning that the license is granted to partake of it and not to perform commercial activity with it. And therefore, its offsprings, and if its offsprings were obligated to the requirements of the firstborn, then there would be some kind of commercial activity. You taking it and you giving it to the Kohen. But it's not to be handled, it's not to be traded. And therefore, it is exempt. Produce of the sabbatical year are exempt from the requirement of giving the firstborn to the Kohen. We already explained in Hilchos Ba'achalos Asuros of the laws of forbidden foods, that it is forbidden to perform commercial activity with substances that are forbidden to be eaten. And we explained, so that's another concept. If it's something you're not allowed to eat, that you're not allowed to do commerce with it, and certainly you wouldn't need to give it to the Kohen. And we already explained in Hilchos Trubos that it is forbidden to perform commercial activity with Trubos. So that first separation of Trubah. Sorry, I made a mistake before. I said the first tithe is given to the Kohen. The first separation is given to the Kohen, which is Trubah, which I think we said is a 50th, and then the next 10% is given to the Levi. But that's just correcting something that I said a few minutes ago. But back to what we're saying right now. Again, Trubahs are not allowed to be used for trade and therefore are exempt from the laws of firstborn. Similarly, it is forbidden to perform commercial activity with a firstborn, even though it's permitted to sell them in the manner explained above. So the firstborns are also considered holy to be given to the Kohen. Final two halachas, selling firstborns. Although we just said in halacha number 9 that you're not allowed to sell them, you need to just give it to the Kohen. If a person bought a firstborn for a wedding feast for his son, or for a festival, and then it turns out that he didn't need it, I don't know if the wedding was cancelled, or maybe he overcatered, he would be allowed to sell it. So this concept of selling is selling it as far as just at the outset. But if you bought something, you would be allowed to return it or to sell it on to somebody else because you bought it in error. Finally, halacha number 11, we do not evaluate unblemished firstborn animals for Israelites, because as long as they're unblemished, you're not allowed to eat it. So there's no reason to evaluate it. You just need to hold on to it. But we do evaluate blemished firstborns. We can evaluate unblemished firstborn animals for Koyanim in the present age, because ultimately he's not going to be able to bring it as an offering to Kohen, because there's no Beis HaMikdash. So it's just a matter of time till the Kohen will be able to eat it. And therefore you can already evaluate it now. Needless to say, we evaluate blemished animals for a Kohen because he's allowed to go ahead and eat it. So it is okay if he knows its value. And now for the questions.
Okay.
Are you asking something?
No.
If a sheep gives birth for the first time to 2 males, what is the law? The larger, stronger one is given to the Kohen and the other one is permitted to its owners. The weaker one is given to the Kohen and the other one is permitted to its owners. The weaker one is given to the Kohen and the other one is considered a doubtful firstborn.
Number 3.
Number 3.
Very good.
Yes.
How do we treat animals which are of doubtful firstborn status? They are left to pasture until they develop a blemish, and then the owners can eat them. They may not be offered as a sacrifice. Instead, they are given to a kohen. They are sold, and their worth is used to buy a different animal which is brought as an offering.
One.
I think number 1.
Yes.
1. Yes.
Yeah.
If a kohen kept a firstborn animal that was given to him with a colleague, so he entrusted it to a colleague, it got intermingled with the rest of the herd, and one of the animals died, what should be done? The weakest animal in the herd is given to the kohen. The owner can choose which animal he wishes to give to the kohen, or unless the kohen can prove that the animal that died was not his, the owner is not required to give him anything.
3.
Number 3. Number
Very
3.
good. Finally, can we rely on the word of a Jew who claims that an animal of his is of doubtful firstborn status?
Yes.
Very good. We said Jesus trusted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we have done well. That is 4